He just wanted a quiet meal. But when a gang walked in demanding more than food, no one expected what would happen next. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss how this ends. The rain tapped gently against the windshield as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson pulled into the gravel parking lot of a small roadside diner just off a quiet two-lane highway. The neon sign above the entrance flickered erratically, casting a pale red glow onto the puddles below. "Open all night," it buzzed, its hum barely audible beneath the sound of thunder rumbling in the distance. Dwayne turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the rain, the distant crackle of lightning, and the low hum of blues music barely escaping the diner's walls. He stepped out into the wet air, his boots crunching softly on gravel, then opened the glass door. The bell above it gave a tired jingle. Inside, the atmosphere was warm but heavy. The diner was small, with cracked leather booths lining the walls, a handful of truckers quietly eating their meals, and an old jukebox playing slow, melancholic blues in the corner. The walls were decorated with faded photos of better times, pictures of smiling regulars, county fair ribbons, and old newspaper clippings. Dwayne's presence immediately drew attention. His towering frame and unmistakable face turned heads, but he gave a small nod to anyone who looked, then made his way to an empty booth in the corner. Behind the counter, a young black woman worked with the efficiency of someone who had done this job for too long. Her name tag read Lauren, and her expression was polite but distant. She moved like someone who was tired but couldn't afford to slow down. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and the sleeves of her uniform were slightly rolled up, exposing arms that carried trays, cleaned counters, and dealt with rude customers every day. As she approached Dwayne's booth with a small pad in hand, she forced a smile. "Evening," she said, her voice soft but steady. "What can I get you?" Dwayne offered her a smile in return. "Double burger, fries, and black coffee, if you've got it." "Coming right up." She turned toward the kitchen window, calling out the order with practiced tone. But Dwayne didn't miss the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flicked toward the front door with a flash of tension before she looked away again. Something wasn't right. He scanned the diner from his booth. The regulars seemed subdued, heads down, movements minimal. Even the man reading a newspaper in the corner turned a page too slowly, like he wasn't really reading. Dwayne leaned back, arms crossed, letting the warmth of the coffee mug in his hands seep into his fingers. He wasn't here to make trouble, just a quiet night and a hot meal. But trouble had a way of finding him, and he could feel it coming. The air changed with a sudden bang. The front door slammed open so hard the bell cracked sharply against the glass. Cold air and the smell of wet pavement rushed in with 5 men dressed in leather jackets, stained jeans, and heavy boots. They walked with the swagger of people used to getting what they wanted. The man in front, stocky with graying hair and a jagged scar running down his left cheek, scanned the room like he owned it. His pale blue eyes locked onto Lauren behind the counter, and a slow smirk spread across his face. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice rough like gravel. "Still here, sweetheart?" Lauren stiffened, her back going rigid. She didn't answer right away. The other 4 men fanned out behind Rick, each one with their own look of menace, from a lanky one with a chipped tooth to a broad-shouldered guy with a tattoo creeping up his neck. Dwayne didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. Rick stepped up to the counter and slapped both hands onto the surface with a loud smack that made Lauren flinch. "Thought you'd have learned your lesson by now," he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Lauren stared at him. "Whatever you want, I'm not giving it to you." The chipped tooth man laughed. I think you will. You always do, eventually. This is a business, Lauren said firmly, not your playground. Rick rolled a sugar packet between his fingers and chuckled. See, that's where you're wrong. This diner's in our territory. That means you pay to keep it running. You don't like it? Things start happening. Fires, broken windows, accidents. One of the other bikers knocked over a tray of silverware. The sharp clatter of forks and knives echoed through the diner like a warning shot. The jukebox warbled slightly, as if reacting to the shift in mood. Dwayne's grip on his coffee mug tightened. I told you, Lauren said, voice tight. I'm not giving you anything. Rick sighed, shaking his head. Disrespect like that gets people hurt. He reached across the counter. That was his mistake. Dwayne stood, quietly, calmly. His hand shot forward and caught Rick's wrist mid-motion. The entire diner froze. The grip was iron, unmoving. Rick's eyes widened. A biker near the jukebox whispered, That's the Rock. Rick turned his head slowly, eyes climbing from the hand gripping him to the man behind it. His smirk faltered. Well, hell, he muttered. Looks like we got ourselves a movie star. Dwayne didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His stare was enough. Rick tried to pull away but couldn't. His smile turned bitter. You really want to get in the middle of this, tough guy? Dwayne's voice was calm, deep. You've had your fun. Now leave. The room held its breath. Rick hesitated. His pride fought with his common sense. The other bikers shifted uncertainly. Then Rick made his choice. He wrenched his wrist free, taking a step back. Teach him a lesson, he growled. The chipped-toothed man cracked his knuckles and stepped forward. Dwayne didn't move. Not yet. But the fight had begun. The chipped-toothed biker lunged with a wild swing, aiming for Dwayne's jaw. But Dwayne had seen it coming before the man even moved. With precise timing, he ducked low, letting the fist sail over his head. In one smooth motion, he rose up and drove his shoulder into the biker's gut, lifting him clean off the ground and slamming him across a table. Dishes shattered, ketchup splattered across the wall, and the table collapsed beneath the weight of the impact. Gas rippled through the diner as forks and plates clattered to the floor. Another biker with a neck tattoo roared and rushed from behind, locking a thick arm around Dwayne's throat. But the hold barely lasted a second. Dwayne grabbed the attacker's arm, twisted it with a brutal torque, and flipped him over his shoulder in a flawless judo throw. The man crashed into the tile floor, groaning in pain, his limbs splayed. A third thug, bearded and burly, grabbed a chair and swung it at Dwayne's back. The wooden frame splintered on impact, shards flying across the floor. Dwayne flinched but didn't go down. He spun around with fury in his eyes and drove a brutal elbow into the man's face. Blood sprayed from the biker's nose as he dropped to his knees, dazed and mumbling incoherently. Chaos erupted around them. One of the customers screamed and dove under a table. Another crouched behind a booth, holding a salt shaker like a shield. But none of them intervened. They just watched. Dwayne turned his head slowly. Rick was still standing by the counter, arms crossed, a sick grin on his face. "Come on, Johnson," he taunted. "That all you got? Or do you only look big on screen?" Before Dwayne could answer, the fourth biker, narrow-eyed, twitchy, pulled a small switchblade from his pocket and flicked it open. The blade gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Lauren gasped from behind the counter. "Dwayne, look out!" The biker lunged, blade first, aiming low and fast. Dwayne sidestepped with the grace of someone who had practiced footwork all his life. He caught the attacker's wrist mid-strike and slammed it down on the edge of the counter. The knife clattered to the floor, and Dwayne delivered a thunderous backhand across the man's face, sending him flying into the jukebox. The music stopped with a warped groan as the machine sparked and went dark. Now only Rick remained. His gang was sprawled across the floor, moaning, twitching, defeated. Rick's smirk faded. He glanced at each of his men, seeing nothing but failure. "You messed with the wrong man," Dwayne said calmly. Rick's jaw tensed. He reached under his jacket and pulled out brass knuckles, slipping them over his fingers. He clenched his fists and stepped forward. "You've got muscle," he growled, "but I've put bigger guys than you in the dirt." Dwayne rolled his shoulders, eyes locked on the man. "I'm not here for the show. I'm here to finish it." Rick roared and charged. He threw a heavy punch straight at Dwayne's face. Dwayne ducked, caught his wrist, and spun behind him in a flash. Using raw strength, he lifted Rick onto his shoulders and dropped him with a devastating slam right through one of the broken tables. The table cracked like firewood under the weight, and Rick crumpled to the floor, breathless and broken. Silence. The kind of silence that buzzes in your ears. Everyone stared. Lauren's hands trembled where they gripped the counter. A few of the customers peeked from behind booths, eyes wide, mouths open. Dwayne stood tall, breathing steady, surveying the room. 5 men lay scattered across the diner in various states of defeat. Rick groaned, barely lifting his head. You're going to regret this," he wheezed. Dwayne crouched beside him, his voice low and steady. "No, you will." Then came the sound that changed everything, the distant cry of sirens cutting through the rain outside. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet window panes. Dwayne stood, brushed the dust off his jacket, and exhaled. "Time for the cleanup crew." The door burst open and 2 police officers entered, weapons holstered but ready, eyes scanning the aftermath. They froze at the sight of the destruction. The broken tables, the unconscious bikers, the broken jukebox, and the man himself standing quietly in the center of it all. Sergeant Michaels, a tall officer with graying hair and the demeanor of someone who'd seen it all, narrowed his eyes at Rick. "Rick Dawson," he muttered. "Didn't I tell you last time you'd run out of luck?" Lauren stepped forward, her voice shaky. "They came in, demanding money. When I said no, they tried to hurt me. If he hadn't," she pointed toward Dwayne, "I don't know what would have happened." One of the truckers stood up. "He's got it all on video," he said, holding up his phone, "from the second they walked in." Sergeant Michaels took the phone, watched a few seconds, then looked down at Rick. "You're done." He gestured to his officers. "Cuff them all." The younger officer hesitated when he reached Dwayne. "Sir, we'll need a statement." Dwayne raised a hand. "You've got witnesses and video. That should be enough." Sergeant Michaels gave him a respectful nod. "Appreciate what you did here tonight. We've been trying to nail these guys for years." Dwayne didn't smile. He just watched as Rick was dragged to his feet, wincing with every movement. Rick glared at Lauren. "You think this is over?" he spat. "I got people. They won't let this slide." Dwayne stepped forward. Rick flinched. "It's over," Dwayne said coldly. "You just don't know it yet." As the last of the bikers were hauled outside into the flashing lights, the diner began to breathe again. Customers emerged, whispering. Someone applauded quietly. Lauren stared at Dwayne, eyes wide. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," Dwayne replied. "You stood your ground. That's what matters." And somewhere outside, beneath the stormy sky, the last echoes of Rick Dawson's reign began to fade into the night. The flashing red and blue lights painted the rain-slicked windows as the police cruisers pulled away from the roadside diner. The battered bikers were cuffed and crammed into the backs of the squad cars, their groans fading into the night. Inside, the diner was left in uneasy silence, like the air after a violent thunderstorm. The jukebox still leaned against the wall, tilted and silent, its power severed by the impact of one of the attackers. Tables were shattered, chairs overturned, and a mixture of broken plates and spilled condiments littered the floor like remnants of a barroom brawl. Lauren stood motionless behind the counter, her breathing unsteady as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. For the first time in months, the bikers weren't inside that door, weren't looming over her or laughing in her face, but their absence didn't bring immediate peace. It brought questions. What would happen next? Would they come back? Could this really be over? Dwayne remained seated at his booth, now surrounded by the debris of battle. He held the coffee mug Lauren had given him before the chaos began, though its contents had long gone cold. His expression was unreadable, calm yet alert, as though waiting for something. He glanced toward Lauren, watching her in silence as she slowly gathered broken silverware into a tray. "You don't have to clean this up right now," he said quietly. Lauren looked up, startled. "Somebody's got to," she replied, forcing a weak smile. "Might as well be me." Dwayne nodded, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. She stopped wiping the counter and sighed. "I'm okay," she said, though even she didn't believe it. "Shaken, but okay." "I've seen what shaken looks like," Dwayne said. "You're standing. That's more than most do after something like this." She let out a small breath, unsure whether it was a laugh or an attempt to stop from crying. Before either of them could speak again, the bell above the door jingled. Lauren flinched instinctively, but it wasn't trouble. It was one of the truckers who had hidden behind a booth during the fight. A wiry man with a trucker cap and a kind face, he stepped forward holding his phone out. "Hey, he said cautiously, "I just wanted to say that was incredible. You really gave those guys what they deserved." Lauren blinked. "You stayed the whole time?" He nodded. "Caught the whole thing on video." He glanced at Dwayne. "Hope that's all right?" Dwayne gave a simple nod. "It might come in handy." "Was thinking of posting it," the trucker said. "People need to see what really went down. Those guys have been scaring folks around here for years, but this could make people believe they're not untouchable anymore." Lauren hesitated. She didn't like attention. Her whole life she had kept her head down. Blending in had been safer. But maybe that's why Rick and his crew had lasted this long, because people like her kept quiet. She met Dwayne's eyes. He said nothing, just waited for her answer. "Post it," she said finally. The trucker grinned and moved to a booth, already working on the footage. Lauren leaned on the counter, arms crossed tightly. "You really think it'll help?" "It's not about the views," Dwayne replied. "It's about showing people that fear doesn't have to win." She nodded slowly. "Still feels like it's not over." "It's not," he admitted. "Rick said he's got people. Guys like him don't back down after one loss." She swallowed hard. "Great." Dwayne stood, stretching his shoulders. "But now they know they're not invincible. And you're not alone anymore." She watched him for a moment, eyes softening. "Why'd you do it? Step in like that?" He didn't answer right away. He looked around the diner, at the broken furniture, the dazed customers starting to come out of hiding, the remnants of a battle that would be talked about for a long time. "Because too many people look the other way," he said finally. "I've seen it. Good people suffering while everyone pretends not to notice. I figured it was time someone didn't." Her throat tightened. Before she could reply, the diner door opened again. 2 more officers entered, one young and tense, the other older with eyes that had seen too much. They approached the counter, their boots crunching on glass. "You the one who called in the charges?" the older one asked. Lauren straightened. "Yes, that was me." "Good," he said. "We've been trying to get something to stick to Dawson and his crew for a while. Nobody ever wants to press charges. They're too scared." "Well, I'm scared too," Lauren said, "but I'm tired of being scared and quiet." The older officer nodded with approval. "Your statement plus the video might actually hold this time. Might be enough to put him away." The younger officer glanced toward Dwayne. "Not every day we see a man like you involved in something like this." Dwayne shrugged. "Didn't plan on it, just couldn't sit by." The officers took more notes, then handed Lauren a card. "If you need anything, day or night, call that number. We'll keep patrols near here for a few weeks." She took the card and held it tight, nodding. "Thank you." They left as quietly as they came. As the door shut, Dwayne exhaled. "Still think it's over?" Lauren shook her head. "No, but at least it feels like the beginning of something different." She looked around the diner. It was still a mess, but in that mess was something new. A shift, a change, a spark. And, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. The diner felt different in the aftermath. The adrenaline had drained away, but the echo of what had happened still lingered like smoke after a fire. Lauren stood behind the counter, gripping the edge as if it were the only thing holding her up. The card from the police rested beside the register, the ink smudged slightly where her fingers had pressed against it too hard. She kept staring at it, as if it could answer the question circling in her mind. Would Rick come back? Would his people come for her now? Dwayne hadn't left. He sat at the same booth, arms crossed over his chest, eyes following her with quiet focus. He hadn't spoken for a while, given her space, but his presence was solid, unchanging, grounding. When she finally met his gaze, he raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know. I guess I should be. They're gone, right? Arrested. But it doesn't feel over." Dwayne nodded slowly. "Because it's not." His voice was calm, steady, but it carried a weight that made her stomach twist. She looked around the diner. Broken tables, splintered wood, streaks of blood on the linoleum, the jukebox leaning sideways. It was a mess, but she was still standing. That had to count for something. "They said they had people," she murmured. "What if they come back?" Dwayne leaned forward. "Then you don't let fear decide what you do. You already made your move. That's what matters." Lauren exhaled sharply. "Easy for you to say. You're the Rock. You don't have to wake up here every day and wonder what face is going to walk through that door." "I wasn't always who I am now," he said. "I've had to fight through fear too. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is what you stand for when it shows up." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "So, what do I do now?" "You keep going," he said. "You press charges. You don't back down. And you make sure everyone around here sees that those guys don't own this place anymore." Lauren turned her eyes toward the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds hung low and thick, but the sirens had faded. In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself. Not just a waitress anymore. Something more. The bell above the door jingled again, and both she and Dwayne tensed slightly. But it was just another customer. An older woman who had been hiding earlier. She clutched her purse tightly as she stepped up to the counter. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said softly. "What you did tonight, standing up to them. It was brave. Lauren nodded, unsure what to say. A man near the back booth stood as well. They've been bullying people for years, shaking down shop owners, threatening families. We all just learned to live with it. But you and him, you changed that. Lauren looked back at Dwayne. He gave a small nod. You think they'll really stay gone? She asked. Dwayne's expression was unreadable. For now, but Rick's the kind that doesn't like losing. If he's got friends out there, they'll hear about this. The mood in the diner shifted again. The fear returned, but it didn't settle in the same way. Now it came with a fire under it. No longer a silent acceptance, but the tension of people who were finally angry enough to do something. Lauren picked up the landline behind the counter. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed. The phone rang twice before the dispatcher answered. "This is Lauren James," she said clearly, "from the Carson Street Diner. I want to file an official report against Rick Dawson and his crew for extortion, assault, destruction of property." Her voice didn't waver this time. She kept her eyes forward, focused, strong. When she hung up, the diner was silent again. Then the trucker who had recorded the fight stood up holding his phone. "The video's already spreading," he said. "Comments, shares, people are talking. Maybe now more folks will stand up too." Lauren didn't respond right away. She looked down at the counter where the brass knuckle had left a dent. Then she looked back at the card from the police and slid it into her pocket. Dwayne stood from the booth and walked up to the counter. "You did good," he said. She looked at him. "I still feel like I'm waiting for something." "You are," he replied. "The next test. But when it comes, you already know how to handle it." He reached for the coffee pot on the counter, filled her mug without asking, then his own. "To new beginnings," he said. She clinked her mug against his. The moment was small, quiet, but it held something powerful, something new. The fight wasn't over, but the fear wasn't in charge anymore. The storm had passed, but its shadow still clung to the diner like residue. The scent of wet pavement mixed with grease and scorched coffee grounds. Lauren moved slowly between tables, setting upright chairs and sweeping broken glass into a dustpan. Each piece echoed like a memory, sharp and heavy. Her body ached, but it wasn't the physical weight that slowed her. It was the heaviness of everything that had changed and everything still to come. Dwayne remained in his booth, watching her. He hadn't said much since the police left, but his presence filled the room. There was something reassuring about how grounded he was. No matter the chaos, he didn't flinch. "You sure you're okay?" he asked eventually. She nodded, then paused. "No, but I'm better than I was an hour ago." He gave her that faint smirk again, the kind that barely lifted the corner of his mouth. "That's a start." Customers had started returning in small numbers. First, the trucker, who came back to finish his coffee. Then, a couple who had hidden under a booth during the fight, now nervously ordering toast and eggs as if pretending things were normal would make them so. Lauren felt every eye that glanced her way. Not with pity, but with a new kind of recognition. She wasn't just the quiet waitress anymore. She had become part of something bigger. The trucker waved her over. "You seen the comments?" he asked, holding out his phone. "That video's already got over 20,000 views. People are calling you a hero. And him," he pointed at Dwayne, "they're calling him Justice with biceps." Lauren stared at the screen. Faces she didn't know praising her, cheering the takedown of Rick's crew. It didn't feel real. "I didn't do it for attention," she said. "I know. the trucker said. "That's what makes it matter." She walked back behind the counter, refilled a few coffee mugs, and set a fresh plate in front of Dwayne. "On the house," she said, "for saving my life and my diner." He looked down at the burger and fries, then back up at her. "You saved it. I just moved furniture around." She let out a soft laugh. The bell jingled again, and they both looked toward the door, their muscles tightening instinctively. But it was just another officer, the younger one from earlier, walking in and setting a card on the counter. "In case you need backup," he said, "we'll be making extra rounds. But if you notice anything or anyone strange, don't wait. Call us." Lauren picked up the card, looked at the number. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "We'll do what we can. But truth is, what happened here tonight, that's what's going to scare them most." As he left, Lauren looked around the diner. The damage was still there. Booths cracked, walls scraped, the jukebox was completely dead. But there was something stronger in the air now. Resolve. A woman seated near the counter leaned forward. "You think they'll come back?" Lauren met her gaze. "Maybe, but if they do, I won't be the same person I was." Dwayne nodded at that, finishing the last bite of his burger. "Now, that's what I like to hear." Lauren looked at him, the silence between them warm now. "You sticking around?" He stretched his arms. "Tempting, but I've got miles to go." She tried not to show her disappointment. "Well, I owe you a lot more than a burger." He stood, tall and solid, like a wall that nothing could move. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep standing your ground." She held out her hand. He took it in a firm shake. "Thanks, Dwayne." He gave her one last nod, then turned toward the door. But before he left, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "Next time trouble walks through that door, you won't need me." She smiled, really smiled this time. "We'll see." The door closed behind him, the bell giving one last jingle. Outside, the night was still wet and cold, but inside the diner something had shifted for good. Lauren walked slowly back behind the counter. She picked up a wet rag and started wiping down the surface where Rick had leaned earlier, where he had threatened her and claimed ownership of something that was never his. Now it was hers again. And this time, she wasn't letting it go. The next morning, the sun rose slowly behind a curtain of low gray clouds, casting a pale light over the sleepy town and the battered diner that stood quietly at the edge of Carson Street. Dew clung to the windows and puddles dotted the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. The neon sign in the front window blinked on and off, still struggling to stay lit after the previous night's chaos. But inside the diner, something had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady determination. Lauren was already there, sweeping up the last of the glass and setting fresh chairs around the booths. She wore the same uniform, but she moved differently now, with more presence, more certainty. The fatigue in her shoulders hadn't vanished, but it no longer dragged her down. It felt earned, like the sore muscles after a hard-won victory. The jukebox in the corner was unplugged and pushed aside its frame, cracked but repairable. A few locals had wandered in that morning, cautiously at first, but after seeing the calm inside, they'd taken their usual seats. Coffee was poured, eggs were scrambled bacon sizzled, and life returned in small, comforting steps. As Lauren poured a cup for one of the regulars, she heard the bell above the door chime. She looked up out of habit, and for a split second a flicker of tension passed through her chest. But it wasn't Rick. It wasn't any biker. It was just the trucker from the night before, walking in with a newspaper under one arm and a tired smile on his face. "Mornin'," he said, sliding into a booth. Lauren smiled. "Mornin'. Usual?" You know it?" She turned to grab the coffee pot and noticed the headline on the front page of the paper he'd brought. She paused. The bold black letters read, "Biker Gang Taken Down at Local Diner." Beneath it was a grainy photo pulled from the video footage showing Dwayne mid-move slamming one of the attackers through a table. Another image showed her behind the counter, eyes wide, hand clenched on the edge. "You made the paper," he said, noticing her gaze. "Both of you." Lauren stared for a moment, then gave a quiet laugh. "Never thought I'd end up in the news for serving coffee." He chuckled. "You served justice, too. People are talking about it. Some say it's the best thing that's happened around here in years." She poured his coffee and leaned on the counter, glancing again at the article. "I just did what I had to do." "Exactly," he said. "That's what makes it brave." Throughout the morning, a few more familiar faces stopped by, each offering a word of thanks, a nod, a small gesture of support. One woman even brought a basket of muffins, saying it was the least she could do. Another customer quietly left a $20 bill under his empty plate with a note scribbled on the napkin that read, "For standing up." Lauren accepted the kindness, but kept her focus. The fight might be over for now, but Rick's warning still echoed in her mind. He had people. There was always a chance they'd come back, but if they did, they wouldn't find the same woman they'd once tried to scare. Around midday, a black SUV pulled into the lot. The door opened, and out stepped a tall officer in plain clothes, followed by a younger man in a police uniform. Lauren recognized them immediately. The older one had been there the night before, steady and calm through the aftermath. They stepped inside, scanning the diner before walking up to the counter. "Lauren," the officer greeted her with a nod. "Mind if we have a word?" "Of course not," she said, motioning them toward an empty booth. They sat down, and she joined them across the table, napkin, dispenser, and salt shaker pushed aside. The officer folded his hands. "Rick Dawson's being held without bail," he said. "Charges are being filed for multiple counts of extortion, assault, attempted intimidation, and more. He won't be getting out any time soon." Lauren felt a weight lift off her chest. "Good. But," the officer continued, "we do believe some of his associates might still be around. We're increasing patrols and we'll be watching closely. We need you to be alert. You did the right thing pressing charges. Now, we just want to make sure you stay safe." Lauren nodded. "Thank you. I'm not planning on backing down." "Didn't think you would," the officer said, rising to his feet. "If anything feels off, you call. Don't wait." They left her with another card, this time with a direct line to the precinct commander. Lauren tucked it into her apron pocket and returned to the counter. She looked around the diner, the repaired tables, the freshly cleaned booths, the sunlight beginning to push through the gray. The place still bore the scars of the fight, but now they felt like something to be proud of, not something to hide. A little after 1, the bell above the door rang again, and this time her breath caught for just a second before she smiled. Dwayne Johnson stepped through the doorway, sunglasses and one-hand leather jacket slung over his shoulder. He scanned the diner, then spotted her and grinned. "You're still standing," he said. She laughed. "You thought I wouldn't be?" "Just making sure," he said, walking over to the counter. "Place looks better." "Still a little bruised," she said, "but healing." He nodded. "Word's getting out. That video's everywhere now. People talking about it like it's some kind of movie." She poured him a coffee. "You're used to that, aren't you?" "Maybe," he said, sipping. "But this was real. What you did, that wasn't acting." They stood in silence for a moment. "So, what now?" he asked. "I keep going," she said, "same as before. Only now, people look me in the eye. Customers smile. The regulars tip better. and I don't feel afraid every time that bell rings." Dwayne smiled. "That's how change starts." She leaned forward slightly. "You leaving again?" "Soon," he said. "I've got places to be, but I wanted to check in. Make sure you were good." "I am," she said. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "Thanks to you." They exchanged one last handshake, firm and warm. As Dwayne turned to leave, Lauren called out one last thing. "Hey," she said, "if trouble ever comes back, don't be surprised if I'm the one throwing the punch this time." Dwayne turned back, his smile wide. "Now that I'd pay to see." Then he was gone, the bell ringing one last time as the door swung shut behind him. Lauren stood there in the quiet that followed, then turned back to work, coffee pot in hand, and a new kind of confidence in her step. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long warm rays across the parking lot, and the diner's neon sign flickered once before glowing steady at last. The battle was over, but the fight for dignity, for strength, for peace, that was just beginning. And now she knew she was ready for it.